Hello everyone, and welcome to Past, Present, and Occult. I'm your host, Emiliano Noriega Petty. We all see the world differently. For some of us it is true that there is good in everyone, and for others of us it is true that everyone is awful. More simply put, we are all living different truths, and these truths affect everything from how we see the world to how we feel and what we think. We call this a worldview in psychology, and in magic we call this a paradigm or a reality map. The Qabalah is an example of a particularly efficient reality map for some people. Reality maps are magical models that allow people to understand reality and the place of a person in it. The fancier way to say that is, reality maps explain the connections and interplay of the macrocosmos and the microcosmos. Most reality maps are a combination of symbols, pictures, and words. Not only do they help the map maker to see their reality, they also act as teaching tools to explain their particular point of view and way of seeing the world and magic to others. Alchemical texts give us many examples of these reality maps. As you can see from some of these examples, they are very detailed and complex. You'll also notice that many of these so-called maps seem to be paintings and drawings as opposed to traditional maps. This is because what you are mapping is the entirety of the divine mind. All things which exist or might exist do so within the consciousness called the divine mind, which is controlled by that thing we call God. What is this thing we call God? Well, the answer to that comes from either creating and exploring your own reality map or by successfully using one that already exists. The most common one to use is the Tree of Life from Qabalah. If you want to climb the Tree of Life, as it's called, how do you do that? Well, let's look into it. Let's start with a legend. In Eden, there were two trees. One was the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which was forbidden to Adam and Eve. The other was the tree of life, and was not forbidden to them. Even after their so-called sin, the tree of life was not forbidden, only restricted. Quote, "Then the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, and now he might stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forevermore." After this, I think most of you know how the story goes. Adam and Eve are expelled from Eden, and the Tree of Life now seems to be out of reach. However, it isn't. It's still possible to climb the Tree of Life, and there's a particular way that people who practice magic like to do it. Well, let's take a look at the Tree of Life. As you can see, it has a top-to-bottom orientation, is numbered and colored, and you happen to start here. This sphere or sephira is called Malkuth and means kingdom in Hebrew. Let me take a moment to point out here that the Qabalah is ultimately a Jewish invention in the sense that it originates from the Jewish religion, and in particular, if you want to learn more about this, you can read a book called the Zohar, which I've linked down below. Once it was encountered by the West, it was ultimately changed into what we now call Hermetic Qabalah, and the two models are similar but not the same. I won't compare the two of them in this video. I just want to point out that when you're looking up models of this, you're specifically looking up models of the Hermetic Qabalah because that's the guide that I'm going to use here. Returning to Malkuth, which is the 10th sphere of the Qabalah, let's discuss what it represents. Well, primarily it represents the physical universe, as in all matter and energy that makes up tangible reality. As such, one of the keys to conquering the sphere is the realization that we still live within the kingdom of God. Our world, especially the parts of it that are still natural and untouched by people, are beautiful. And even though some of you might feel that many of the people in the world are particularly cruel, the truth is there is good out there, even if for you the good people are hard to find. Even if your life has, let's say, been particularly negative up until this point, or in the recent past hasn't been as fun as it used to be, things don't stay that way forever. In the same way that there can be good and bad fruit, or a good and bad version of anything, there are good and bad people and good and bad experiences. I say all of this because the skills needed to master the sphere of Malkuth are discernment and discipline. Part of living life and a key part of your happiness will be what you pay attention to and who you associate with. If you focus on the negative and the bad, then your life will begin to fill itself with experiences and people like that. I know that all this sounds very simple, but what you give attention to is what you also give power to. For many, trying to see the good through all of the bad might be the hardest part of climbing the Tree of Life. However, it is the achievement that will have the most immediate positive impact on your daily life. Regardless of where you are going and what you truly wish to be and how you wish to live, we live in a broken world. Our response to that brokenness in the world, ourselves, and people is what really is going to end up defining us at the end. So with all of that said, how might you use magic and ritual to do any of this? First, you're going to need a few things, namely an altar, ritual tools, tarot cards, and some privacy. It doesn't particularly matter what shape your altar is, however, I do recommend that you have one that you can walk about, but if yours is connected to a wall or against a wall, that isn't the world's biggest issue. Start by decorating your altar with symbols of Malkuth. You can look up a list or you can take a screenshot of the one I'm providing you with here. Also, remove the following tarot cards from your deck and rearrange them in the following manner about the altar. You'll also want 10 candles if possible, and you're also going to want the following colors to increase the associations with Malkuth. The reason that you're doing all of this is you're trying to help your brain focus on the task at hand, which is conquering the sphere. Also, it provides a nice setting for the ritual you will end up performing to move on to the next sphere, which is called Yesod. Since I went into detail about this particular ritual for Malkuth in my last video, I'll review it here briefly, and if you want to know more, watch Magic and Meditation. The ritual experience that you are building up to is called Knowledge and Conversation with your Holy Guardian Angel. Your Holy Guardian Angel is considered your true or higher self. It will act as a guide of sorts when you are attempting to climb the tree of life. For some people, they experience it as a part of themselves, and others experience it as a completely separate entity. All of you are going to have unique experiences, and if you want to learn more about this particular experience, I really suggest watching my last video. In that video, I explored methods to contact your Holy Guardian Angel, and I gave 3 rituals you can try to do as well. If you do try the rituals, let me know in the comments for that video if you please. Now, on a very fundamental level, before I go on, what we're talking about here is expanding your consciousness, and when we say that, let's try to understand what we actually mean when we use that phrase, because it gets thrown around a lot. So, expanding your consciousness can mean anything from trying out a new idea to opening yourself up to new experiences and new understandings of yourself, the world, and your place in it. When you think of expanding your consciousness like this, it's not just about trying to wrap your head around a new idea or trying to have an incredible experience. It's about really trying to change who you are deep down, and by doing so, you're hoping to have a positive effect not only on yourself, but the world that you're in. Now, the next part of this video is on the 9th sphere of Yesod. This isn't just for people who have finished the practices for the earlier sphere. You can just watch this if you're curious and want to know where to go after. The 9th sphere is called Yesod, and it means foundation, and this is rather interesting because it is considered to be the foundation of our physical reality. Let me get into that here. All spheres before the 10th can be considered non-physical planes of reality and individual worlds in and of themselves. The world or plane of existence that Yesod represents is very familiar to many practitioners of magic, and that's the astral plane. We are all in some way familiar with this plane because the astral plane is where all of us go when we dream at night. Quite simply, it's the place that you go when you dream. Practitioners of magic, from Wiccans to Thelemites, often make use of the astral plane for a number of reasons. Now, visiting a sphere and conquering a sphere are not the same thing. Since the spheres of the Qabalah can also stand for mental states, you have probably visited all but the highest 3 by this point in your life, unless you've been particularly sheltered or protected in one way or another. As I mentioned at the beginning of this section, Yesod has the name that it has because it is the foundation of our physical reality. Things must exist in the astral before they can begin appearing in the physical. As such, Yesod is the realm of magic because it is the place where the imagination runs rampant, and the main tool of magic is the imagination. The ultimate idea here is that if we can change what's occurring in the foundation, we will ultimately be able to change the kingdom, or Malkuth. If you can change that, then what we're talking about is being able to in some way affect physical reality through the practice of focus, magic, and meditation. Ritual, by thought and action, allows us to affect the astral plane and through it the physical one. As the Earth is connected to Malkuth, the Moon is connected to Yesod, and it is said to be its ruling planet. From a certain perspective, this actually makes a lot of sense because the Moon is associated with magic and psychic ability, and it also happens to be at night that the vast majority of us sleep and therefore dream and enter the astral plane. Now let's look at this from a slightly different perspective. From the point of view of psychologists like Carl Jung, the astral plane is in fact the collective unconscious. This is the place where all unconscious minds, including your own, touch and mingle, so to say. Because of this fact, one of the names of Yesod also happens to be the treasure house of images. This is because it contains all thoughts, archetypes, and concepts like a large library would. Or, I guess for a more modern example, a database. Now, keep all of this in mind as we are now going to discuss how you conquer the spheres. So how exactly do we do that? Well, just like with Malkuth, you're going to want to make use of your altar, and you're going to decorate it so that it corresponds with the sphere of Yesod. To do this, you're going to want to make use of the following symbols, colors, and meanings. You'll also be looking to develop the skills of trust and independence with the goal of having a vision, which is often called the vision of the machinery of the universe. This vision could happen during a ritual, meditation, or just when you're going about your day. Before I discuss the vision, let's discuss the two skills so that we know exactly what I'm talking about here. Now, I do want to make something clear. By trust, I certainly don't mean blind trust in any particular person or organization. Ultimately, everybody except the people that you truly love the closest has the risk of failing you. And even then, in the modern world, very few marriages, or at least half of them, do fail. In the sense that we're going to discuss it right now, trust is actually crucially linked to independence, because the trust that you're looking to develop is trust in yourself, trust in your ability to be on your own and to make judgments that keep you safe and that keep you progressing in the future. Another way to look at it is you're trying to really develop your sense of intuition. By intuition, I don't mean your particular sense to guess or to predict something correctly, but more your innate feeling about a situation that tells you whether you should, from the very beginning, associate yourself with a particular person or cause. It's the part of you that knows if this is something worth spending time on. For some of you, this will be particularly challenging because, again, it's hard to understand this still small voice, but that is what we're talking about. We're talking about that still small voice within you continuing to give you this correct feedback. You see, after having knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel, the idea is that it will continue to act as a guide for you, and by acting as a guide, it will lead you in a path that is very fulfilling and that keeps you emotionally supported along with every other positive thing you would really want in this case. If you're saying that seems to be a bit of a hard sell, well, the idea is that the holy guardian angel is the higher or truest part of yourself, and that part of yourself doesn't want to hurt you, it wants to keep on improving you. Now let's start exploring this vision that I discussed earlier that's connected with Yesod. Also, what exactly do I mean by having a vision? Do I mean that you're going to see something, hear something, or do I just mean that you're going to have a particular epiphany or understanding about the world that will make your way of seeing the world different? What do I mean is what I'm trying to get at here. Well, whatever will happen to you is going to depend on two things. Primarily, it's going to be your mental state and what you happen to be doing at that particular time. For instance, if you are in a deep state of meditation or prayer, you might in fact see images in your mind's eye or hear something. But if the event happens during a ritual, it could be something more along the lines of seeing things in the smoke, fire, or it could again happen in your mind's eye. Finally, there is the chance that regardless of what you're actually doing or what you're up to, it'll simply be a realization that comes over you. You'll just have this epiphany or understanding that you lacked beforehand. However, what about those of us who do in fact experience the divine this way and happen to notice that there is a certain consistency or at least ability for them to have visionary experiences? What does the vision of the machinery of the universe look like? Is there a theme that underlies the visions? Is there a certain consistency between person to person, or is there never a shared theme or anything between the visions? Even though the following description that I'm about to give you is subjective, there is some similarity between it and the various visionary experiences that people tend to have around this point in their climbing of the Tree of Life. I'll begin. Since Yesod is a lunar realm, many people see a goddess or spirit of the moon. Many alchemical mandalas look like this vision, so let's take a look at a few of them as I begin to explain. As you can see from looking at these rather detailed scenes right here, what the vision ultimately allows you to glimpse is a bit of God's plan or the divine plan, whatever you want to call it. It's a chance for you to see the order of the universe from the foundational point of view. The experience allows you to see how all things click together to form our world. By seeing how they go together, you can change them by moving things around, so to say. Mastering the sphere allows you to really practice magic, as Yesod is the sphere of magic. It's like opening the back of the clock and being able to see all of the pieces. Now that you see them, you can put them in any configuration you want to give yourself the outcome that you've been desiring this entire time. Now, some of you might be thinking that conquering the first two spheres is all you need to do. I mean, you've met your holy guardian angel and you can now do real magic. What more would you want to do at this point? Well, this sphere is just the start of your consciousness opening up. There is still so much more reality for you to see. In conquering Yesod, you will begin to get a taste of your personal and higher wills beginning to merge. However, this merger is not going to become permanent until much later, so for now, no matter how satisfying these early results are, I would really like to encourage you to keep climbing the tree. In my last video, I briefly touched on something that I want to go into more detail about here, and it's the ultimate goal of climbing the Tree of Life, and that's usually called accomplishing the great work. But really, what does that mean to you today? What does that actually describe? In modern magical traditions, there are ultimately two ways to look at this answer. The first is the Hermetic and the second is Crowley's. I'll begin with the Hermetic understanding of the great work, and to do that I'm going to quote Eliphas Levi or Levi, however you want to pronounce it. The great work is before all things the creation of man by himself, that is to say, the full and entire conquest of his faculties and his future. It is especially the perfect emancipation of his will. Furthermore, from the Hermetic perspective, accomplishing the great work can be seen as achieving enlightenment and is also symbolized by the creation or finding of the Philosopher's Stone. It's the point at which you liberate the part of yourself that's been trapped by misunderstanding and illusion since your birth. The way members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn sometimes say it is making the unconscious conscious. Integrating the shadow part of yourself is another way to talk about it in New Age groups or in a pagan way. Now, Crowley's definition of the great work is different because he's going to define the great work as unification or mystical union with Nuit. Now, who exactly is Nuit, or Nui if you're going to go for the French pronunciation? Well, she is the goddess of Thelema. She's the first speaker within the Book of the Law, as each chapter of the Book of the Law has a particular speaker. It's one of their three gods, and her chapter is specifically about being everything. In the first chapter of the Book of the Law, the goddess makes it very clear that she is all of existence, including every potential thing that could occur and everything that has in fact happened, both future, past, and present. Since Thelema likes to also use scientific perspective, she's the entirety of space-time. By discovering your true will and unifying with Nuit, you are able to have the accomplishment of the great work, which is basically this from Crowley's perspective. I'm going to quote his Magick without tears. The great work is the uniting of opposites. It may mean the uniting of the soul with God, of the microcosmos with the macrocosmos, of the female with the male, of the ego with the non-ego. As you can see from Crowley's point of view, the great work can be any number of things so long as it accomplishes the main definition, which is that it reunifies opposites or it reconciles opposites. It brings things together that were once parted on the physical plane. This is why in the OTO, ritualized sexual magic is taught as one of the higher secrets, because in that way it's a very basic reunification of opposites. It's male mixing with female, and it gets more complicated than that, but that's how you can understand why they're attracted to that branch or way of doing things. I'm saying all of this just to point out that the great work in Thelema, or from Crowley's perspective, can actually be accomplished in more than one way. With all of that being said, what if the Qabalah isn't for you, or it's not enough for you? Well, then what should you be doing in order to still accomplish this if you want to be magical, mystical, and ultimately ritualized about it? Well, since one of your short-term goals could be described as attempting to arrive on the astral plane or being able to access it successfully and master it, let's see how you could do that if you weren't going to use the Qabalah. Let me tell you how I've done it. The first step, as I talked about in the last video, would be to explore your own mental landscape, and you can do that using the technique I shared there. Now, having done that, where should you actually go now that you're in a capacity to explore your own mind? Well, one of the places that you should make an effort to look for can be described as your inner sacred space or inner temple. This place might in fact look like a temple, or it could take a number of other forms. It depends on what type of magic and cultural tradition you're drawn to. Exploring the space as described in my previous video would require you to use your imagination, but remember, your mind is what's building reality, so since everything's happening in there to begin with, who cares why it's in there to start with, so to say? Well, obviously you do, and in order to explore that, you need to give yourself the ability to see it via your imagination. So let yourself see this inner space, let yourself see this inner temple, and try to see it as your mind immediately presents itself to you, not necessarily as you exactly want it to look when you're entirely conscious. I'm going to cover this particular way of doing it in much more detail within a separate video, but I just wanted to point out that yes, there is another way that doesn't use the Qabalah, because I know that is a great sticking point for some students. Remember, all of this is ultimately a journey of self-discovery, so allow yourself to guide yourself. Don't try to get in your way by overthinking things, and don't try to make it perfect by trying to discover the exact way to do it. There isn't an exact way to do it, there's just your way of doing it. It doesn't matter how different your way is from anybody else's, what matters is the results. If they bring you peace, enlightenment, and allow you to find the particular spiritual goals that you were looking for, then your way was correct. Don't let anybody else tell you that. Anyhow, that brings us to the end of today's lesson, and I have a few updates. If you are enjoying my channel, want to hear me in person, and live not too far from Newport Beach, California, I want to invite you to a lecture on August 17th at 9 a.m. The location is Newport Mesa Lodge number 241. My topic is Oaths and Covenants. What does it mean to make a deal with the divine? The lecture is open to Masons and non-Masons, except for the final 10 minutes, which are for Master Masons only. I hope you can make it, and there is a breakfast. If you would like to book me for a lecture at your own lodge or organization, you can do so at www.enplectures.com. You can also book me for retreats or workshops, and I also do one-on-one spiritual direction if that's something you're looking for. If you're wondering what spiritual direction or guidance entails, it is possible to book a free session one time on my website. Again, this is all done through www.enplectures.com. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to me there as well. You can also follow me if you would like on Instagram as _Noriega_Petty, but that's a mixture of my occult stuff and my personal life, so if that's not what you'd be interested in, just stick here on the YouTube channel and you'll be more than happy. I want to take this moment to thank you for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. It's because of you that I'm doing as well as I am. As always, if you have any questions or topic suggestions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. Thank you again for watching. This has been Past, Present, and Occult by Emiliano Noriega Petty. I'll see you all next time.